you for allowing me to say a few words about my very good friend Jamie Sprayregen. For those of you who don't know Jamie super well personally, let me paint a picture for you. Jamie takes the art of multitasking to a completely different level. He is one of a kind. His dedication and work ethic are literally the stuff of legends in not only legal restructuring communities, but throughout the general business community. I can't tell you how many times I meet someone, whether they're in San Francisco, New York, or London, and they're like, "Oh yeah, who's that? Who's that wild guy that's always on the phone, right?" And I know immediately who they're talking about, and that's Jamie. Jamie, you know, you can walk into his office. He's got two conference calls going at one time, and he's on a walking treadmill. And I'm like, "Oh, sorry." And he's like, "No, no, come in, come in, come in." He puts them both on mute, and we're talking. I don't know how he's sort of juggling it all at the same time, but he somehow manages to do it. I've seen him ski down a mountain with a phone to his ear. Rumor has it he once did it with two phones. I hadn't seen that, but I've heard that. But my favorite is a few years ago. It was shortly before the pandemic. One of my clients I was working on had a major restructuring issue, and things were getting a little bouncy, as they often do in the restructuring world. And we were going to lose the matter unless it was very clear to me, you have one chance of retaining this matter, Bayless. You got to bring in Sprayregen. So I texting Jamie, and it was a little unusual because it's a text back 30 seconds later. But now this one took like 2 hours. It's like, "Oh, sorry, I'm in China." I'm like, Jamie, I'm sorry about this, but like, I really need you on this conference call tomorrow. And he's like, "Oh yeah, no problem, no problem." So we do it. And he's spot on, like sharp, prepared, knew exactly what to say. We end up keeping the matter. He then sends me a picture of where he was when he was on this conference call. And I don't know if you'll all be able to see this, but Jamie was in Chengdu, which is where there's the only panda reserve in the world where you could literally be next to a panda. And I apologize, Tracy, for imposing on this, but this was the picture of Jamie with a panda while he is on the phone saving our matter. And I can't tell you, this is the ultimate Jamie Sprayregen picture in my mind right there. So look, to say the least, Jamie's had an incredible career with more accolades than I possibly could cover here in just a few minutes, which you've asked me to speak. He's widely recognized as one of, if not the best restructuring lawyer in the history of the United States. He has led some of the most complex Chapter 11 filings in recent history. Since joining Kirkland in 1990, Jamie's built and led, which is now our #1, I'm very proud to say, restructuring practice in the world. He served on our management committee for over 15 years. A handful of those I had the pleasure of serving with him. And he even took a break from practice to serve as the co-head of Goldman Sachs's restructuring group. Jamie loves to give back and mentor younger people coming up in the field, whether they're within our own institution or elsewhere. He'll do literally anything for anyone else's child who asks. His gift to the University of Illinois College of Law simply just exemplifies Jamie's desire to give back in every way he can. He truly is a living legend. On a personal note, Jamie's been incredibly good to me, and I owe a lot to him. He's mentored me throughout many topics and issues that come along in one's career that are inevitable, sometimes smooth, sometimes bumpy. And perhaps most importantly, he helped guide me through the appointment of the job which I now have. And I am not silly enough to know that I might not be sitting or standing here today without your support, Jamie. So thank you very much. He's opened up his incredible Rolodex to me. He's made countless introductions. And Spray, again, on a personal note, I'll always be indebted to you, so thank you. But beyond all of that, my highest compliment to Jamie, beyond all the professional stuff, is his family. He's constantly talking about his dedication to his family, how much they mean to him, always traveling with them, always telling stories. And it is something, as I've sort of come up my way and in my own journey as a grounding force and makes me remember about sort of what really matters in life. So with that, I am truly honored to celebrate Jamie and Professor Brubaker with you here today. Jamie, congratulations. Thank you on behalf of all of us for your generosity. You're truly an inspiration for us all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. In addition to celebrating our honorees, the professor whose investiture this is being held for, and their families and friends, as John's remarks suggest, investitures are an important opportunity to honor the donors whose vision and generosity make events like this possible. The James H.M. Sprayregen Professor of Law was established, as we know, from a generous gift from Jamie Sprayregen and his family as part of the With Illinois campaign. You heard a lot about Jamie from John, but let me offer a few more background facts. He's a 1985 magna cum laude grad of the University of Illinois College of Law and a 2006 recipient of the Distinguished Alumni Award. He's a restructuring partner here in Chicago and also the New York office of K&E, and he has served on Kirkland's Worldwide Management Committee from 2003 to 2006, then again from 2009 to 2019. He really is, I think, the most well-known, well-regarded corporate restructuring person in the country, and maybe in the history of the field.
Sorry, just give me one.
Okay. You know, I could read all of the honors and accolades that Jamie has compiled. It probably would make him uncomfortable because he's not a person who wants people to be talking a lot about himself. But you know, in 2010, he was selected by the National Law Journal as one of the decade's most influential lawyers, not in his field, of all lawyers in all fields. He was named Global Insolvency and Restructuring Lawyer of the Year in 2013. Again, I could go on and on. He has extensive experience in representing major U.S. and international companies, both in court and out of court. He's handled matters for clients in industries as varied as manufacturing, technology, transportation, energy, media, retail, real estate, you name it. He's got extensive experience advising boards of directors and generally representing debtors and creditors in complex workout, insolvency, restructuring, and bankruptcy planning matters worldwide. So I don't think John was exaggerating when he said the only way to save this matter is to have Jamie work on it. He is the go-to person in the fields in which he operates. And again, I could go on about that, but I want to leave more time for Jamie to say a few remarks, and then for Ralph to accept his honor today. I will say this: someone with Jamie's level of accomplishment and competitiveness. He's a guy who competes against himself and against the world in all kinds of endeavors. You'd expect him to be, you know, not nearly as approachable. You'd expect him to have airs. And as John pointed out, you know, you walk into his office and he makes you feel like there's nothing or no one as important as you at that moment. It's a really remarkable quality. I've enjoyed getting to know Jamie. I've enjoyed getting to know his son, Charlie, who almost ended up at the University of Illinois College of Law and at the last minute showed a terrible lapse in judgment and ended up at Northwestern. But I'll forgive you for that and him for that. But he really is dedicated to his family, his firm, his profession, and to his alma mater. Jamie, I could not be more grateful to you for all you've done, and not just for generous financial support, for being an ambassador for the College of Law. There's several people that I always point to for what one can accomplish when one comes to the College of Law, and you're in that group. And it's been such a pleasure to get to know you personally. So thanks again, and I'll let you say a few words before we introduce Ralph.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Dean, for those kind remarks. John, thanks for those overly kind remarks. That panda actually gave some good advice that helped me on that call. So I'm honored actually to honor Professor Brubaker here, and this is more about him, so I won't talk too long. You know, it's a little bit ironic that not just Professor Brubaker, but we're sitting here with other luminary insolvency and bankruptcy professors from the college, and Professor Tabb, and there's others, and that Illinois has actually become, I think, a really center of bankruptcy law, taking nothing away from Northwestern Professor Markell. And that has nothing to do with me, but I kind of enjoy that that's the way that that's played out. I will say, you know, remembering back to my times at the law school, I almost wasn't in a position to actually graduate law school. I still remember my first final at law school was contracts with Professor Maggs, Peter Maggs. I remember it was in the law school library, 3-hour final. There's 5 questions. And I read the first question and I literally have no idea what I would say to answer that. So it's all right, I'll come back to that one. So I read the second question, same thing. Same thing all the way to the 5 questions. And long story short, I sat there for 2.5 hours of the 3 hours. I did not write one word. And I was like, well, I guess I'm flunking out of law school. I ended up scribbling a lot of stuff and getting it done at the nick of time at the end of the 3 hours. And I ended up doing all right. But I think I'm convinced that the reason I did all right was you couldn't read a word I wrote. In those days, you wrote it down, and my scribbling is not that easy to read. I will say it's interesting, and I related the story to Professor Brubaker, that, you know, this is called the James H.M. Sprayregen Professor of Law, but he does all the work and he does it independent, and I have no input on it whatsoever. He recently came out with an article on non-debtor releases, completely at odds with my opinion, and briefs that this firm has written in many situations. And I actually started getting phone calls from people saying, how could you have written that article? And I was like, what article? And then I went and looked at it. I was like, I didn't write that article. Professor Brubaker did. It says James H.M. Sprayregen, Professor of Law, not that I'm the author. It goes to show that we do have complete independence and academic integrity here, because I disagree with most of that article. Although it was very well done. I'm not really going to go on much longer. I actually want to recognize my parents, my wife, and my son-in-law here, and thank them for coming and all the incredible support over the years. And I thank the law school and the professors. Oh, by the way, one little correction. I've been trying to correct this for about 15 years. I keep getting introduced as magna cum laude, and I wasn't. I was just cum laude. And I remember when you did that distinguished thing back in 2006. I walked in and I was like, in these days of resume fraud and all that, I like to have this correct. So we got to get that corrected before someone like says I'm overstating my qualifications. But there you go. So anyway, I'm just you know, happy and proud to be able to support this. I look forward to great scholarship continuing to come out of Professor Brubaker. And I was going to mention, he's not just a professor of law, he's part of the bankruptcy ecosystem, is what I say, the what I call the rescue culture that we've developed in the United States, which I think is incredibly valuable. And it's kind of like the extra statutory system. It's all the stuff that's not written down. It's what really happens. He's a member of the National Bankruptcy Conference along with me, and that's great. He's a fellow of the American College of Bankruptcy Fellows. And a whole bunch of other awards. And I think that's incredibly important to do all the academic stuff that you're doing, and then do all of this other stuff that's helps fill it all in and make it all kind of fit together in the messy way, in the messy world of the restructuring business. So, you know, thank you for that. And with that, I'll cede the podium. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jamie, and we'll correct that honorific. And for the record, we misrepresented, not Jamie, misrepresented his credentials. Maybe we can go back and look at a few exams and see if you deserve Magna. There you go. I mentioned earlier that it's particularly special that we're doing this event in Chicago. And as a testament to that, we have several folks from Chicago here today, from Champaign here today. I want to recognize my colleague, Professor Charles Tabb, and my colleague, Professor Michael Moore, who is here as well. And last but certainly not least, we have with us the leader of our UIUC campus, Provost Andreas Cangeleras, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, and Provost, and M.E. Van Valkenburg, Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering. For those who are not super familiar with how universities work, I think a provost is essentially the COO of a university. The provost sets the academic direction. The provost makes the resource allocation decisions. The provost is the strategic force behind the university and the day-to-day leader of everything that happens on the Urbana campus. And I go to sleep at night a lot more comfortable knowing that Andreas is in that role. He was formerly the Dean of the College of Engineering at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He's a prolific researcher in electrical and computer engineering. But for the past 5 years almost, he has been so instrumental, along with our Chancellor Robert Jones, who has done a great job as well. But the Chancellor is more of an outward-facing position. The Provost is really the hand on the university that guides us. And as I said, for the past 5 years, he and Robert both have lent a stability and a vision and an energy to the university that explains why UIUC and the College of Law are both doing so well these days. So, Andreas, thank you for coming up from Urbana, and I'd like you to say a few words if you're willing.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Dean Amar, for these kind words. I hope he has convinced you that the Provost is in the line of fire on a daily basis, primarily internally, as the Chancellor is in the line of fire predominantly externally at the university in this day and age. But we are not here to talk about the leadership of the University of Illinois. We're here to talk about the community that makes the University of Illinois so special and so influential. And I say this because this is what we celebrate with these investitures. We celebrate the community that is created by universities like the flagship university in the state of Illinois, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. The College of Law, you know very well, is one of the most influential colleges, not only in the state of Illinois, but around the country. And we are very proud anytime we have the opportunity to celebrate our scholars and recognize their impact, primarily through the contributions they make to the education of their students who come out here and change the world, look after the well-being of the world in ways that make all of us more comfortable with the well-being in good hands. And I say this because as I was finding out that we're going to have this investiture in Chicago, I got very excited. And Dean Amar will tell you I have been, even though I was not born and raised in Illinois, even though I'm not an alum of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, but my connection with the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign has been very strong. More than 25 years that I have been here. I was delighted that we're going to have this investiture in the city of Chicago. In my mind, coming from another part of the world, when we think about Chicago, we're thinking about city-state, we're thinking about the capital of the Midwest, we're thinking about perhaps the most influential city in North America. And we can object, you can object to that, and I will be happy to argue why I say this, but I want you to appreciate the fact that I represent a university that has presence everywhere in the world, And all those alumni and those who benefit from that alumni, that's what they tell me. That what the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and Chicago mean to the world is very difficult to describe in words. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to say that the UIUC, as our honoree today, Professor Brubaker, made very clear to me, we just call it Illinois because the UC complicates things. But I must admit that it is a pleasure to be here, and I hope as we progress, we have many more investitures of this kind in Chicago. Investitures are very special. They bring together our distinguished faculty, bring together the community, our colleagues. They bring together the alumni, which are actually, the alumni body constitutes the backbone of the university. In numbers, they're the ones who define what the University of Illinois is all about. In terms of impact, they're the ones that communicate to the world what the University of Illinois is all about. And anytime we have an investiture event, that's what we celebrate. We celebrate the alumni, the stakeholders, those who benefit from them, coming together to recognize one of those stellar professors who are being distinguished by their own colleagues for their outstanding scholarship and contributions. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Ralph, it's a pleasure to be here. Congratulations. And we look forward to the many more things that you will make possible. And we can assure you, your title is not going to confuse anyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. And now to the man of the honor, the man we are honoring today. Ralph Brubaker joined the University of Illinois College of Law faculty in 2004 and has served as the Mildred Van Voorhees Jones Faculty Scholar, the Guy Raymond Jones Faculty Scholar, Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, Interim Dean of the College of Law, and as I mentioned earlier, the Carl L. Vacchetta Professor of Law. He teaches courses in bankruptcy, bankruptcy procedure, corporate reorganizations, contracts, conflicts of laws, which is private international law, and restitution. He is a triple Illini with 3 degrees from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, including his JD, summa cum laude. I got that right, Ralph. I'm not stretching it, okay. And an MBA. And he received bronze tablet distinction, which is the highest honors, and a CPA certification as an undergraduate. Following graduation, Ralph clerked for Judge James Logan of the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, and he practiced in the bankruptcy and corporate reorganization group in the law firm of Squire, Sanders, and Dempsey, now known as Squire Patton Boggs, after one of the many mergers of law firms in the recent decades, in Cleveland, Ohio. He was a member of the faculty at the law school at Emory University School of Law in Atlanta, Georgia, from 1995 until 2004, when we were able to lure him back to his alma mater here in Champaign-Urbana. He is the editor-in-chief and a contributing editor for West's Bankruptcy Law Letter. He is a co-author of a bankruptcy casebook and has written dozens of journal articles and essays that are influential, not just in the academy, but also in the bench and bar. He's cited by the Supreme Court. He does amicus briefs. He's one of these folks whose work is actually not just shaping the ideas that academics talk about, but also the results that courts reach. And I'm very proud of that at Illinois because we want to be a law school that matters. He is particularly expert in the complex jurisdictional and procedural facets of federal bankruptcy proceedings. He's been an editorial advisor for the American Bankruptcy Law Journal, the flagship law journal in bankruptcy law, the American Bankruptcy Institute Law Review, and the Emory Bankruptcy Developments Journal. He's a member of the ALI, that's the American Law Institute. It's a legal reform entity with lots of very highly regarded practitioners and academics, a conferee of the National Bankruptcy Conference, and a fellow of the American College of Bankruptcy, for which he has been the scholar in residence. Ralph has served on the executive committee and of the Board of Directors of the American Bankruptcy Institute, the ABI. And he was a member of the Advisory Committee on Business Enterprise Sales for ABI's influential 2014 Commission to Study Reforms to Chapter 11. He is truly a giant in his field and an anchor of what is clearly the best bankruptcy faculty of any law school in the country. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say either of those things. I also want to take a moment to thank Ralph for the balanced and careful counsel that he has provided me since I arrived in Champaign over 7 years ago. He is ever the voice of reason, and I really wish I had a faculty full of colleagues who are as level-headed, thoughtful, conscientious, and talented as he is. So Ralph, a valued colleague, a most distinguished scholar, an outstanding and devoted teacher. I haven't even talked about how his students rave about him, but that goes without saying because he's so influential in all of his roles. And a trusted advisor. It is a privilege for me today to recognize your many accomplishments and confer on you the honor that you have most clearly earned. So if you would stand and allow me to present you with this medallion marking your investiture as the inaugural James H.M. Sprayregen Professor of Law, then we'll allow you to get back at all of us by saying a few words of your own. Gently. Congratulations.
It's heavy. I may have to get a plastic bag for when I take a shower. So thank you, Dean Amar, for that very generous introduction. And at the risk of turning this into an Oscar acceptance speech that just sort of goes on forever, there is a very long list of people that I need to recognize and thank. And if there's any time left, I will offer a few observations about my field of study. So I know we're all very grateful to Kirkland and Ellis for hosting us today here in their gorgeous offices. And thank you to John Ballas for being here to personally welcome us to Kirkland and Ellis and to recognize Jamie and the significance of Jamie's gift to the College of Law. There's a very long history of friendship, collaboration, and mutual support between Kirkland attorneys, and the College of Law. We're proud of the fact that there's a large contingent of Illinois alums at Kirkland. I'm very proud of all my former students who are at Kirkland and who've been at Kirkland in the past, several of whom are here today, both in person and online. Whenever I start counting how many of my former students are working or have worked at Kirkland, I realize that it's an extremely large number and getting larger and larger as I get older and older, and I get depressed at how old I am and I stop counting. But trust me, it's a lot of students, and I think I'll leave it at that and thank John Ballas and Kirkland for helping us mark this occasion in such grand style. I'm honored that Provost Congelaris would make the trip to Chicago to be with us today. Like Dean Amar, Provost Congelaris is an incredibly gifted and talented, dedicated leader for the university, for the College of Law, for which I'm extremely grateful, not only as a faculty member, but also as an alumnus, as Dean Amar said, a three-time alumnus of the University of Illinois. I actually spent the entire decade of the 1980s, from the fall of 1980 until the summer of 1989 in Champaign as a student. And I've now been on the faculty at the College of Law for a grand total of 19 years. So that is 29 years at the University of Illinois. and I'm what, 40 years old or so. So I've spent the bulk of my adult life at the University of Illinois. And the University of Illinois has always been a very special place to me, and I know it's very special to lots of you. It's an extremely important institution, not only to the state and the people of this state, but its contributions to knowledge, learning, our society, our world are staggeringly vast, impressive, and positive. But most of all, the people at Illinois are great, right? The students, the staff, the faculty, the administration, our alums, alumni leaders, wonderful people, all up and down the line. And the university and the College of Law continue to thrive because we've been and we continue to be blessed with inspired leadership. And both Dean Amar and Provost Congelaris are inspired and inspiring leaders. I'm honored to serve the institution under their leadership, and I'm honored and grateful for their presence here today and their warm and thoughtful remarks. Thank you both. I'm also happy to see all of you here today. It's really something to have a gathering of my friends, all right? So many friends and from so many different facets of my life, family, old classmates, former students, current students, professional and work colleagues. The only other kinds of occasions when you get such gatherings of your friends are weddings and funerals, and I won't be in attendance at the latter. So it's nice of you all to indulge me with sort of a pre-funeral celebration today. And it means a lot to me that you're here both in person and online from all over the world. I think my former student who's in Tbilisi, Georgia, probably gets the longest distance award. And we'll tell you what you've won later, Gocha, but thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here. I would actually like to individually recognize you all, but Dean Amar told me that I can't do that. So I'll have to be content with recognizing my family who are with us here in Chicago today. Many of you know that I have a lot of children, 4, 5, 6, there are so many, it's hard to keep track sometimes. The only one who could join us in person here in Chicago today is my eldest, my daughter, Allison Brubaker, right here. None of my other kids could make it, but that's okay because Allie is my favorite. I'm kidding, right? I have no favorites. I love them all the same, right, Allie? All right. My sister-in-law, Audra Bainey, is here. My niece and her husband are way over there next to the artwork, Gabby and Seth Knudsen. My cousin, Kevin Olerking, is right here. And my daughter-in-law's parents, Vince and Kathy DeLigio, are right over there. And many more family members have Zoomed in, so many that I don't even know who's joined the Zoom session, but I'm sure we'll hear them talking soon. Family, of course, is the ever important constant in life, so it's great to have family members here to help celebrate the day. Since this day is a very important milestone in my career, I'd also like to take a few minutes to recognize and thank some folks who've had a big impact on and influence in my career, which has been an immersion in the complex, fascinating law, policy, and practice of bankruptcy and corporate reorganizations. First, Professor Steve Harris, who many of you knew, who sadly passed away a few months ago. Steve was a great guy and a giant in secure transactions law. Steve taught the first bankruptcy course I ever took in law school, and it was during Steve Harris's creditors' rights class, this enormous course that not only covers state collection law, Article 9, bankruptcy. It was during Steve Harris's creditors' rights course that it first clicked for me that this area of the law brings together all of the many things that I am most interested in, and Steve very kindly encouraged my budding interest in bankruptcy law, which is the practice area I pursued when I got out of law school and went to Squire Sanders, now Squire Patton Boggs in Cleveland. And I had the immense privilege during my 5 years in practice at Squire Sanders to work with one of the most talented attorneys I've ever met, Chris Meyer. Many of you know Chris. Many of you have worked with Chris, and you know exactly what I mean when I sing Chris's praises. Chris and I worked some incredibly interesting cases together in a period of fairly intense Chapter 11 activity in the early 90s. We've worked on other things since then, but Chris taught me how to be an attorney. I learned so much from Chris about being a good lawyer and being a good person. He is just a prince of a guy. He couldn't be here today, but I believe he is zoomed in. So Chris, thank you. And special thanks to my other bankruptcy professor in law school, Professor Charles Tabb, sitting here in the front row. I took Charles's corporate reorganizations course in law school, which really cemented my belief that bankruptcy law was the field for me. And it was also the beginning of what's been a lifelong friendship and incredibly rewarding academic collaboration. Charles has been my academic mentor throughout my career. I would not have been an academic. I would not have an academic career if it were not for Charles. He invested himself heavily in my career and helping me succeed. And as luck would have it, or perhaps not surprisingly, we have very similar scholarly instincts and are very much on the same page in the way we think about and approach the law. In fact, I can't even really think of an instance where we have disagreed about any significant issue, which is astounding, right? Everyone else in the world finds me extremely disagreeable. So we've had a very fruitful academic partnership. Our bankruptcy casebook is now in its 5th edition. We've written many other things together, and I hope we can continue to do so for as long as I can successfully keep Charles from actually enjoying his retirement. So thank you, Charles. Thank you for being here. It's also been a joy to be on the same faculty with my law school classmate, Bob Lawless, who could not be here today, which means I can say nice things about him as long as nobody tells him that I've said nice things about him. Bob was also one of Charles's students, also developed an interest in bankruptcy law in law school, also had the bug to become an academic. And Charles was instrumental in bringing both of us back to Illinois. And it's such a treat to be on the same faculty as 2 world-class, world-renowned scholars in my discipline, especially since they're such great colleagues and great friends. And the fact that we have such tremendous faculty strength in bankruptcy law has generated a lot of student interest in the area. A large portion of today's attendees are our former students who practice bankruptcy law. And we also have some of our current students here today, including in the back row over here, representatives of Illinois' Bankruptcy Law Society, which is a student organization formed several years ago, based solely on student initiative. And it's entirely student run. They sponsor a number of programs and activities for students who have an interest in bankruptcy law, including Illinois students' participation in the National Bankruptcy Moot Court competition. The BLS students who made the trip up today are Meltiva Andanellis, Sam Barter, Luke Johnson, and Zach Reed. Meltiva and Zach are both going to work at Kirkland after they graduate next month. Luke is going to Winston and Strawn. Sam is a 2L who's doing a clerkship this summer with McDermott, Will, and Emory. Sam and Zach were actually a team at the National Bankruptcy Moot Court competition this past year, where they won the Best Brief Award in the nation. So that was phenomenal. And they also advanced to the Elite Eight in the overall competition. We have a lot of students who are very well trained in bankruptcy law and who go on to clerk for bankruptcy judges, practice bankruptcy law all over the country. We're very proud of them. I'd also like to thank my colleague, Professor Heidi Hurd, who was going to be here but had a dental emergency, so could not come. But Heidi is the one who convinced me to come back to Illinois when she was the dean. And I then served as her associate dean. We became fast friends and also scholarly collaborators on a book project that has taken us all over the country and halfway around the world, talking about our book that is not yet written. It's 2/3 of the way written, but we never seem to quite get it done, perhaps because we enjoy flying all over the world talking about it so much. Okay, so I wasn't lying, was I, when I said I have a lot of people to thank, and I'm still not done. My phenomenal assistant, Molly Lindsay, could not be here today, but she is listening in on Zoom. Molly is one of the most amazing people I've ever met. The only way I'm able to do all of the things that I do is because of Molly. I used to joke that the only thing I require of my assistant is that my assistant be able to read my mind. Molly can actually read my mind, right? I send out the telepathic signals on what needs to be done, and Molly does it. It's a great system. I highly recommend it. And she does it with others too, people she doesn't even know. When I speak at conferences, workshops, etc., the first thing people always say to me is not, "Oh, Professor Brubaker, welcome. It's so nice to have you here." It's, "Your assistant, Molly. She's amazing," right? Yes, she is amazing. So Molly, thank you. Thank you also to Carrie Turner and Heather Ball for all of your excellent work organizing today's event. And finally, thank you to Jamie. It is such a tremendous privilege to be named as the inaugural Sprayregen Professor of Law. And many of you instantly appreciate the significance of a bankruptcy and corporate organization scholar like myself being the Sprayregen professor. And for those who don't, Jamie is to corporate organizations what Hank Williams is to country music, right? Or what Bach is to classical music, or Babe Ruth to baseball, or Michael Jordan to basketball, right? The most accomplished corporate organization attorney ever. And that's not an exaggeration. When I was in law school, I actually spent a summer working at Kirkland, but didn't end up going there full time because they didn't really have much of a restructuring practice. Until that is, Jamie came to Kirkland in 1990, and since then has built Kirkland's restructuring practice into the premier restructuring practice in the world, hands down. When large corporations like United Airlines, Caesars Casinos, Zenith Electronics have financial difficulties, they go to Jamie and Kirkland for help more than to any other firm. And you would not as others have noted, you would not realize what a big deal he is just by talking to him because he's so unassuming. But if you'd like to get the full flavor of what he has accomplished in the world of corporate restructurings, I highly recommend an episode of the podcast called Restructure This! Exclamation point, which is a very popular podcast about, of all things, corporate restructuring, almost as popular as the John Oliver episodes about bankruptcy, if you've seen either of those, or perhaps not. The host of Restructure This! Is my former student and Illinois law alum, Justin Bernbrock, at the Shepherd Mullen firm. And in one of the earliest episodes of Restructure This, Justin interviewed Jamie and got Jamie to talk at length about how he built the Kirkland restructuring practice. And it's fascinating. The episode is entitled Building a Bankruptcy Juggernaut, which it certainly is, and I highly recommend it. So in honor of Jamie, I've decided to focus my brief remarks here today on the unique role that organization attorneys have played in the development of the law of corporate organizations. So within bankruptcy law, I've explored many different facets of the law. Much of my work is devoted to analyzing various aspects of corporate organizations like non-debtor releases, and much of my work analyzes the historical development of the law. Well, when you look at the history of corporate restructuring, one of the most striking features of that history is the huge influence of attorneys in the origin of the law and in the subsequent evolution of corporate restructuring, which is a testament to the creative genius, there's really no other word for it, of the corporate restructuring bar. And there's no better illustration of that than the story of the beginnings of corporate organizations, right? So corporate organizations are now governed by the federal bankruptcy law, Chapter 11 of the Bankruptcy Code, which is why these big bankruptcy cases in the news are referred to as Chapter 11 proceedings. It's Chapter 11 of the statute, Chapter 11 of Title 11 of the United States Code. And Chapter 11 proceedings allow a company to continue operating while the corporation readjusts its financial obligations to a level that the corporation can service on a going forward basis, which is not something that bankruptcy law was traditionally equipped to do. The traditional historical model of bankruptcy law was creditors used the process to shut down an insolvent debtor's business, and an independent trustee would take over all of the business's assets, sell them, and then divvy up the proceeds amongst the creditors. Well, when you've got an operating business, that business is worth a lot more as an operating business than what the assets will bring if you shut the business down and then sell what you can, which is a so-called liquidation sale. So creditors might be able to get a much larger recovery by allowing the business to continue to operate and pay the creditors out of the business's future operating income. But there are lots of coordination difficulties that make that hard to pull off without some sort of mandatory process that individual creditors cannot opt out of. And the business that brought that home was the railroad industry in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The railroad boom, as booms often do, led to over expansion. And that expansion was financed by debt, typically mortgage bonds. And when a railroad could not service that debt, the bondholders realized that they were going to recover very little if they shut that railroad down. plus shutting down all of the insolvent railroads, of which there were dozens and dozens at the time, and in some years, hundreds of insolvent railroads. That would have threatened the country's entire transportation and shipping infrastructure, which was principally rail at the time. But there was no recognized process for forcing creditors into restructuring negotiations. Nonetheless, attorneys at the law firms that had helped underwrite the bonds came up with an incredibly ingenious idea for using a couple of ancient legal practices that courts of equity had used for other purposes to create a way to keep the railroad operating by preventing individual creditors from trying to seize railroad assets in order to get repayment, while simultaneously negotiating a way of scaling down, restructuring the railroad's debts in a manner that the railroad could then pay off out of its future operating income. And I won't bore you with all the legal technicalities of how they did that, but it was accomplished via foreclosure proceedings in federal court. So federal judges were an equal partner in this brilliant innovation that was used to save financially distressed railroads. And elite law firms, such as the Cravath firm in New York, predecessor to the present-day Cravath, Swaine, and Moore firm, built huge practices restructuring the insolvent railroads. And just for comparison purposes, when I say huge restructuring practices, the Cravath firm with the most famous and historically prominent restructuring practice, at the height of the railroad restructuring boom, Cravath's restructuring practice had 13 partners and 46 associates. So almost 60 attorneys just doing corporate restructuring work. So Jamie, tell us, how many restructuring lawyers do you have at Kirkland? 200. 200-ish, right? And how many offices around the world? 18 offices, 200 offices, 200 attorneys, 18 offices, right? So right, what Jamie has done at Kirkland, right, makes what Cravath was doing, right, look like child's play, right? So in the histories that academics have written about the origins and development of the corporate bankruptcy system, Paul Cravath is always a central figure in the early history of corporate restructuring practice. When academics 10, 20, 50 years from now are writing about the history of corporate organizations, the central figure in corporate organization of this era will be Jamie Sprayregen. That's how significant Jamie is. The other thing that stands out in the history of bankruptcy law and corporate organizations is the influence that legal academics have had on the development of the law over the years in various ways, including through the National Bankruptcy Conference, the organization that Jamie mentioned earlier that was formed in the 1930s, that's still active and influential to this day. As Jamie mentioned, both he and I are conferees of the National Bankruptcy Conference. Legal academics are constantly criticized for being out of touch with, completely insulated from, and largely unconcerned with what it is that attorneys and judges do, which may or may not be a fair criticism. But that has certainly not been my experience as a legal academic specializing in bankruptcy and corporate organization law. Our field has a very long history and tradition of lots of collaboration and cross-fertilization between and among bar, bench, and academia. And the composition of the attendees here today is a testament to that. And that's one of the things I enjoy most about being a bankruptcy academic is the close working relationships I've developed not only with other academics, such as these gentlemen sitting in the front row, but also with bankruptcy judges and lawyers. The corporate reorganization practice on the ground in real time is what's most interesting about that which I study. In fact, Professor Douglas Baird has a very interesting new book that will be published very soon called The Unwritten Law of Corporate Reorganizations, in which he contends that the practices that are adopted by the professional reorganizers, the attorneys, the bankruptcy judges, the financial professionals, the financiers, the practices adopted by the professional reorganizers are actually much more important than the written law on the books. And that in some senses, the written law on the books is irrelevant to the professional reorganizers. And in that world, the world of the professional reorganizers, Jamie Sprayregen is the most prominent and most influential of the bunch. And his endowment of this professorship is a very fitting expression of the important synergies that exist and the close relationship between scholars and the professional reorganizers. And I'm happy to be part of that ecosystem. So thank you, Jamie, for making all this possible. And to mark the occasion, I have a gift for Jamie, which requires a little bit of explanation. So Jamie and I did not overlap as students at the College of Law. We just missed each other. He graduated in May 1985. I started as a 1L in August of 1985. But we were of the same era, so I thought I could best mark the occasion with a reminder of a prominent campus landmark from our time as law students, which is no longer there, but which provided critical intellectual inspiration for all those who thirsted for knowledge. And I know Jamie did, and he's obviously put that knowledge to good use. So my gift to Jamie. Let's see it. So this is the Illini Inn, which is a bar, a little dive bar just up the street from the law school, a very popular watering hole. Much to my chagrin, it's no longer there. I mean, the Illini Inn is still there. This Illini Inn is no longer there. It's gone corporate and upscale, and it's just revolting. So, Jamie, this is my gift to you to mark the occasion of the endowment of professorship. Thank you very much, Jamie.
Thank you so much, Ralph. As always, I learn when I listen to you. And I was thinking about how maybe other fields of law can learn from the early history of bankruptcy. If judges and lawyers and academics can come together and help solve some problems, even when legislatures like Congress and state legislatures are paralyzed, maybe there's a path forward in a lot of other important arenas. So we honor your achievements today, and we look forward to your future contributions to the Academy, to the University of Illinois, and to the profession. Thank you all again so much for joining us. And as we adjourn, I invite those of you here in person to join us for a reception just outside this room, but thanks again.